Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Amalia, and I'm a webinar manager at Terminal. Terminal is the world's first tech-enabled platform for remote engineering teams. Today, we're presenting Global Engineering, why tech leaders are hiring global talent, and how to do it right. This webinar is the first of the Mastering Remote Scaling Global Tech Teams webinar series, designed to help industry leaders navigate the challenge of scaling engineering teams, global hiring, and finding success in a remote-first world. Stay tuned for an early registration opportunity for upcoming events later in the webinar. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Today's webinar is scheduled to last about 1 hour. All participants will be muted to enable the speakers to present without interruption. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. We'll have time to answer questions at the end of the webinar. We want to make this an engaging experience for you all, so please stay tuned for interactive polls throughout the event. We'll announce polls as we launch them. A pop-up should appear on your screen, and you'll be able to submit your answer at that time. After today's event ends, we've prepared a short feedback survey that will show up in your browser window. We appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions, and we'll use them to improve content going forward. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent via email within 24 hours of the event. Moving on to our agenda. Today's webinar will start out with a quick introduction to Terminal and Handshake. Next, we'll share some results from our survey of 1,000 plus engineers and what they indicate for the future of work in 2022. We'll then speak with Robin Lim, Senior Director of Engineering at Handshake, to hear how he's overcoming the challenges of today's market to continue scaling his team with talent in Canada and Latin America, and what advice he has for leaders that are looking to do the same. Lastly, we'll have time at the end for Q&A. Now we'll shortly turn the time over to our speakers. First, a little bit about our presenters today. Robin is the Senior Director of Engineering at Handshake, overseeing the employer and education engineering teams. He's led teams at multiple high-growth startups through the challenges of scaling, with 10 plus years of engineering leadership experience. He joined Handshake in 2017 as employee number 70. Since then, the company has grown to 500 plus employees, incorporated remote first and remote inclusive teams, and partnered with Terminal to expand employment to Canada and LATAM. Tejal, as a veteran tech marketing executive, brings deep domain expertise across all facets of marketing, including brand, growth, and product. Previously, she has led marketing at startups such as HackerRank and Collective Health, as well as marketing leadership roles at Facebook, Google, and Salesforce. She's passionate about building marketplaces and leading global expansions. So Tejal, welcome. I'll let you take it from here and dive into our presentation.
Thanks, Amalia. Hi, everyone. I'm Tejal Parekh, and as you know, I'm the CMO at Terminal. Before we dive into today's topic of how companies can hire and build global engineering teams, I want to take a few seconds to give you a brief overview on what it is that we do, what it is that Terminal does. So Terminal works with fast-growing tech companies to help them build, scale, and manage remote engineering teams. The company was launched in 2017, has been funded by some of the most reputable VCs, and in the time that the company has been around, we have hired over 700 engineers. Our technology, our platform, and our services provide a simple, scalable solution to hire engineers globally. And we do this through 4 key pillars that you see here on the slide as well. We use our proprietary market insights to help our clients determine which market they should be going in, which market they should be hiring in based on the skills that they're looking for. Our always on digital talent acquisition and our rigorous processes accelerate hiring tremendously. And once these engineers are hired, we fully manage the ongoing people operations aspect for these employees in remote markets. And lastly, our bespoke programming helps engage and upskill your engineers that are hired through Terminal. Today, we hire engineers primarily in Canada and LATAM, and we recently opened our operations in Poland. So just by virtue of what we do, we have firsthand experience with the rapidly changing trends in remote engineering hiring. We're really excited to share these trends with you, but more importantly, I'm really excited to have Robin Lim from and the tips and tricks that they've been using to successfully build a fairly sizable global engineering team and do it fast. So a little bit on Handshake before we dive in. Handshake is the #1 place to launch a career with no connections, experience, or luck. It has a community of over 9 million active students and young alumni from 1,400 educational institutions globally. The platform connects up-and-coming talent with over 650,000 employers from Fortune 500 companies like Google and Nike to thousands of public school districts, nonprofits, and even sports teams like LA Dodgers. Handshake is headquartered in San Francisco, and they have offices in Denver, New York, and London, including the teammates that work globally that are hires from Terminal. So with that, let's dive into the topic for today. Why are leaders looking to hire engineers globally or build global engineering teams? Well, it is because US tech talent shortage continues to be the biggest threat to our success. The latest stats from the Labor Bureau show that there is 1 engineer for every 3 openings. In fact, in a recent survey, executive survey by CNBC, 57% of them said that the labor shortage is their top business concern. So it's no wonder that we're looking beyond US to try and hire remote teams. But I want to take a pause here, and before we go any further, want to take a poll on how has ongoing engineering shortage affected your company. I'm going to take a pause for a few seconds, let you all reply, and then we'll look at what's affecting you guys. All right, so looks like we have 2 winners here. New job descriptions stay open for too long. Yes, something that they're all very, very familiar with. And as a result of shortage, we can also see that the existing team of engineers is feeling the brunt of it, and it can start a vicious cycle where, because the teams are feeling overworked, you're going to then risk losing them as well. So all in all, lots to unpack there. Let's dive into, how can you as leaders get out of that vicious cycle? How can leaders improve hiring strategies and close this massive talent gap that's affecting us and that has exacerbated, frankly, in the last couple of years? So I wanted to walk you through our survey findings, where we have surveyed over 1,000 engineers, global engineers. You can see here just a quick distribution of demographics, and you can see that about half of them, about 40% of the engineers were from Canada, 30% from LATAM, rest from US. The audience skewed heavily towards male versus female. We have more work to do there. And mostly it's people between 24 to 39 years of age. So you can see that it's, again, a good distribution of your typical engineers. And I want to walk us through what we learned from this in terms of their views on remote hiring and what makes it easier for them. So let's start digging in there. One of the things that we saw based on our responses was that, most engineers are still fully remote. And if you look at the chart here, that's pretty compelling. That tells us that more than 70% of engineers want to stay remote majority of the time. But there is a disconnect between what the engineers want to do, what their work preferences are, and what the employer expectations are. In fact, 1 in 3 engineers expect that they will be asked to return to offices later this year. And this shows that there is an opportunity for companies that are really trying to attract talent. There is an opportunity for them to position themselves as remote first, as hybrid structures that will, again, make it easier for engineers to work for them. So that was a pretty compelling finding for us. And as we unpack more into their preferences, we also find that it's interesting that while 75% of the engineers were interested in working for American companies, more than half of them did not want to relocate to US to do so. So in this new era that we're in, engineers don't want to relocate. They want the jobs to come to them. And this is, again, another opportunity for companies to capitalize on what their preferences are and customize the offerings for engineers. To make the case even more compelling for looking at remote engineering teams is, again, looking at how important it is for them and what kind of incentives can further solidify those preferences. If you look at it here, we asked them about, what kind of incentives can motivate them to move to US. And 23% of them indicated that they wouldn't move to US no matter how high the pay raise is. About 30% indicated that they would require more than twice the current salary to move to US. So all in all, we're learning that remote engineering is here to stay, and it's coming through loud and clear through all of the data points. And it is the quickest, easiest way for companies to really solve that massive tech talent shortage that they are experiencing. So with that, with these learnings as a backdrop, there are companies that are succeeding exceptionally well. There are companies that are building, not only building thriving teams, they're building it fast, and they're building them with the right set of team structures, as well as seeing high retention in these remote teams. And so I want to invite Robin to join us here today, because he has seen tremendous success at Handshake in building out remote engineering teams. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Tejal. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, excited to have you here. Excited for you to share, some of your insights and your nuggets of wisdom with the team here.
100%.
All right. So diving in, as we think about, what our survey has indicated, and the fact that majority of the engineers are still working from home, it is critical for employees to support a remote or a hybrid workplace to attract and retain talent. And Robin, I would love to hear from you, your point of view on remote, and how has the organizational structure at Handshake evolved over the past few years?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, and super great question. So Handshake was pretty smart. Again, I was employee 70-ish around the company, but coming in, we had already actually supported engineering teams being remote. And this really relates a lot to our mission here at Handshake. You're going to hear this motto a few times, but where we basically say that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And given Handshake's mission, and Tejal, thanks for explaining kind of Handshake and what we do, right? We firmly believe that it's really hard to land that amazing first job, right? Coming straight out of school, coming straight out of an education institution, a lot of it depends on what sort of background you have, and such as like, how much money do you have? Who do your parents know? And a lot of those factors really impact what type of like first job you get coming out of school, right? And so really extending on that like talent is everywhere, right? It's not all in San Francisco. It's not all in, major city in the US, right? It's everywhere. And we recognize that as Handshake, and really it's very akin to our mission. And so coming in, even pre-COVID, Handshake has always been remote friendly. And so one of the interesting things though, I mean, we talk about remote, and especially that landscape has changed a ton, right? Since COVID, right? A couple of things that have happened is we were initially building our teams around kind of location. So we had 3 primary teams at Handshake. One was a team that was based in San Francisco. One was a team that was based in Denver, which is where I'm located. And we then had like a pure remote team. And with COVID hitting, and also we have this really amazing CTO. He kind of came in and kind of said like, hey, I mean, one thing about that is that it really limits internal mobility by sort of drawing these lines around teams. It's like it was a really, really great point, right? Like in order to really keep our engineers really engaged and keeping the work fresh and interesting and still retain them at the company, they need to be able to sort of shift around and move to different teams and try different areas of our product, try different types of engineering around the company. And so one of the big shifts that we made sort of post-COVID around being even more remote friendly is really kind of getting rid of those lines and saying that, cool, all our teams are generally remote friendly, and we sort of lean towards a hybrid environment right now, where basically some of us are located near offices, and we can come in and really engage in person if we really enjoy that. But in general, everything we practice from in terms of meetings, in terms of communication, is generally very, very remote friendly. So
that's a really good learning, especially sounds like you guys were thinking about this even before COVID, especially around the removing of the lines. That's a really good point. Yeah, remove the lines, go beyond the borders. I feel like we're landing on a good theme here. I want to bring up a quote from Andrew Dudden, who's the CEO of Hims and Hers, one of our largest customers, and a huge proponent of remote and hybrid culture. I think his quote is exactly along the lines of what you just shared, or your CTO's philosophy, which is, there's no way the best people in the world, for all the different roles you need, live within 10 miles of you. This is exactly what I think some of the leaders who've been ahead of the curve have just understood that, and they've gone ahead and made that transition, even regardless of COVID, right? So I think that's really telling. But if you think about the growth rates of engineering talent across the global market, especially outside of US, these global markets then become even more compelling. This is one of the reasons why we expanded. We were originally in Canada, and then we expanded in LATAM 2 years ago. This is also one of the reasons why we expanded to Poland earlier this year, because we just know that the caliber of talent and the growth rate there is just phenomenal. So I'm curious to hear, your thoughts, Robin, in terms of, what's your guiding philosophy when it comes to finding talent in new markets?
Yeah, we have a very similar journey to kind of how Terminal has expanded, right? I mean, again, like pre-COVID, when we were just an office in San Francisco, we were thinking, okay, like let's hire all the talent in San Francisco. This was back when we were young and naive and maybe a little bit less remote friendly. And I mean, kudos to Andrew here, this quote. We were thinking like, there's no way that all the amazing engineers are within San Francisco, right? And at the same time, it's ridiculously competitive being stuck in SF. I mean, let alone the entire US talent market. That actually spurred us, and again, this was quite early in our growth, to expand and build an office out in Denver and look at talent there, but also really opening up and being much more remote friendly to all of the US. Now, to move even beyond that, like, well, okay, we still thought the US talent market was super competitive. So if you were to extrapolate the concept of why you moved out to San Francisco, like, why not look globally, right? For in a talent market. And this map right here sort of shows the exact picture, right? Like there is a ton of talent in Latin America, in Canada, that we hadn't tapped. And so effectively, we started this journey to figure out, like, cool, what is it going to be like hiring outside of the US? Because we know we want to do this. So my CEO set me up to talk to a bunch of CTOs, VPs of engineering, directors who have stood up teams outside of the US to kind of really to really understand, like, hey, like, what should we be concerned about? This seems okay, especially given that we had been really mastering how to work as a remote team, right? One of the salient points that came out of those conversations was really that working inside our adjacent time zones was not as challenging, but working outside the time zone, working outside of our adjacent time zones certainly requires us to really change how we operate. So for example, working in a place like China or someplace like India, you may have, you definitely have to be a little bit more organized so that you're not, taking meetings at, whatever, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning and in Denver time, let's say. So really our strategy in terms of looking at new markets was cool. Like we know we want to go global. We know we want to hire talent outside the United States. Let's take that first step and start working within our adjacent time zones. And this is why we started working with Terminal to look into Canada and Latin America for talent.
Yeah, I know. I've worked with teams in India, in APAC, and I can totally relate to the nonstop 24/7 cycle that can ensue if you're not organized enough about your time. So
yes.
I can completely appreciate that. Given that we are talking about different markets here, I do want to ask the audience, want to take a quick poll to find out what markets are you hiring talent? Just pause for a few seconds, wait for the responses to come in and learn where they're looking to hire people in. All right, so this is quite well distributed. Obviously, Canada is the biggest contender here, but there's a healthy number of folks looking to hire in Poland and Colombia and some of the others as well. So, which is why we're talking about global hiring here today. So it makes a ton of sense. One of the other big learnings for us over the last year was that when hiring in international markets, we need to open remote roles as we no longer can expect talent to come to us, as I shared a bit earlier in the survey. And when it comes to attracting talent, we still saw based on the survey that compensation is still the biggest driver, followed by nature of work, followed by culture, the importance of culture for the engineers. Does this align with what you're seeing, Robin?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, pay, I won't even spend any time on that. I think a lot of us agree that like pay is a huge factor, especially when you're hiring and closing candidates. So I'll touch on maybe the other two: exciting work and culture. A lot of the things that we've done at Handshake really lean into those latter two areas, right? In terms of really making sure that like our work is exciting, like really Handshake, what we really tout and what's really, really important to us is really about our mission, right? Really democratizing opportunity, making sure, our students, our learners, everyone eventually has a fair chance at landing that amazing job, right? And so personally, I joined Handshake because really our mission really resonated with me. And, for me, I also wanted to work in the education space and combining my skills in technology, right? And so again, that really exciting work really like resonates with me and why I ended up joining Handshake. At the same time, like we're blowing up as a company. We've been doubling, every year. And so the fact that we are successful as a business as well and working in this high growth startup, I think really excites and really invigorates a lot of people, right? To talk a little bit about the culture bit, it's really interesting. Culture just means a lot of things. And I know we have a lot of candidates come and I interview a ton of people and they're like, well, what's important to you? And they're like, well, culture. And it's like, okay, but what exactly does that mean, right? So one question I tend to ask in interviews is, what do you need in your next role or company in order to be happy and successful? And really that helps like elicit like what people actually care about when they mean culture. So it might elicit like, hey, I really care about work-life balance, or, I really care about really amazing management. And for us, it's a really great question too, to really ensure that our employees really care about Handshake's mission and what we want to, what we're trying to accomplish. That for us is a very important alignment in terms of candidates and hiring for us. So, so yeah, just to throw it out in the ether out there, maybe a question that you can ask in your interviews when people say they care about culture. So that is, again, what do you need in your next role or company in order to be happy and successful? So
I like that. I'm going to steal that for a lot of our interviews as well. We are obviously going through massive hiring ourselves, and you're right. And culture is such a broad bucket of things. Means different things to different people, but yeah, by asking that question, you can really unpack what they need, right?
okay.
I'm going to ask, again, time for one more poll because we're talking about such meaty topics. I want to ask the audience here, what describes your remote recruiting strategy? All right, so a couple of really clear winners. Recruit locally to 1 to 2 main regions where offices are based. So still leaning towards offices. We now recruit employees globally outside of US. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's good to hear, good to see that a large percentage still are looking at offices outside of the US and expanding there. With that, want to talk about, because we talked about compensation being the biggest driver, I want to unpack that a bit more and really share what I thought was very insightful based on the survey responses, and how companies, how leaders can craft very remote specific packages, compensation packages for these engineers. So what we found was that engineers increasingly want salary transparency. Not talking about, putting the salary figure on job posting, but still very much want that information upfront, whether it's in first conversation or a screening call or something. So that was very telling. They also want home office or remote benefits like utilities, internet, etc., covered, right? So that's again one of the top 3 benefits that they ask for. They want flexible work hours. They want access to the right productivity tools. Again, this was something that we saw last year as well, and continues to show that people do care about these 3 benefits. But what was also really interesting for us, and potentially an opportunity for employers, hiring managers to again use to their advantage, is engineers really want to see equity as part of their compensation. A large number of them talk about how important it is to see equity as part of their compensation package. And we know from our data that equity is not offered by several companies for their international workforces. And so again, the learning for companies would be, if you are looking to hire in regions outside of US, do consider offering equity as part of the compensation package to make yourself more attractive, to really stand out from the rest of the workforce. And so I'm curious, Robin, how have you seen this play out? What resonates the most with your remote or hybrid workforce?
Yeah, both of these are very important, as you all saw on the last slide. Like pay, super duper important, and to lean on the equity piece. If you're a startup like Handshake, equity is going to be a really key factor to compete against the FANGs or the larger companies that can sort of really throw money at hiring some of the top talent. And equity can be that game changer in terms of helping close a candidate and sort of really helping them understand the benefits of equity, stock options, RSUs, whatever you provide, right? To lean a little bit on the benefits piece that you mentioned, certainly Handshake does do these kind of like top 3 remote benefits. I think the internet stipend, we started offering that when COVID hit. Super cool. We also have a home office stipend. So I bought this webcam here, hello. And I bought like a really nice keyboard that makes it super like, it just makes me a lot more productive and more, it just like more, brings me a lot of, more fun to work when I have, the peripherals and the things that I need, right? Some additional things to add here to the list, right? We offer like a learning and development budget. So it's about $2K a year at Handshake. So one of the huge things for us by providing that budget, right? Like it provides remote learning opportunities, say like through Udemy or Reforge or something like that. And hey, I mean, remote working is great, but sometimes you want to like connect with your coworkers in person. And again, that's why Handshake has gone hybrid. So by offering sort of that larger stipend, it allows us to, potentially like meet in person for conferences. Saying, for example, a bunch of us are going to RailsConf this year in Portland, and we're, a few of us are going to fly in person and meet up. Another unique benefit that I'll just add on here is really about, we call it holiday time off. And we offer 2 days to celebrate holidays that are not regularly taken off, say like a religious holiday. And so one of the benefits here to connect it with remote work, it really allows, say like your remote workers to connect and identify with each other through that shared culture, right? So getting a little bit creative to helping your remote workers connect through benefits has been part of the strategy as we've been developing Handshake.
That's exciting. You guys definitely have some cool offerings there. I like the flexible holiday time off as well. I'm sure many people would appreciate the opportunity there. I'm realizing that we are running a bit behind, so I'm going to jump into the next section, which is, no remote hiring plan is complete unless you're thinking about customizing, hiring, and recruiting to your remote audience as well. What we've learned from our findings is, like certain markets, like Latin American markets, they prefer shorter interviews. They are not as used to, pair programming interviews. And that is something that definitely needs to be thought through more as companies are looking at their remote recruiting process as well. And as we think about, how do you customize your recruiting process? How do you go into these markets that you don't have a lot of insights into? One does need to think about pairing up with the right partner. So moving on to the next section here, let's talk about what do you look for when choosing the right partner for hiring beyond your typical geographies. Robin, I'll turn this over to you and ask you, first of all, does it make sense to choose a partner? If so, how do you go about deciding on which partner to choose?
Yeah, I mean, very clearly that we've partnered with Terminal, right, on as we've been sort of taking our first step into hiring outside the United States, right? And one of the things that was super compelling when working with Terminal is that, well, first of all, y'all were very embedded and very knowledgeable about the countries in which we were interested in. So being so knowledgeable in the Canadian market, the Mexican market, the Colombian market, these are the areas where we're hiring from today, was huge for us. And again, that time zone alignment was incredibly important to us as we started taking this first foray here. And what was like so compelling in terms of like proving that you were also knowledgeable about this market? You know, one thing that I was really impressed with on the Terminal side was, you know, y'all had data scientists that really gave me really easy to understand statistics around, say, cost and the talent market, and you know how senior was that talent market. And it was very easy for me to basically justify the case to work with a partner, to work with Terminal, to basically like move into these 3 different countries, into these 3 different markets, right? So basically, as we have been engaging with Terminal over almost a year now, y'all have been just very, very flexible in sort of marrying our recruiting process with Terminal's recommended best practices. And it's just been a really amazing partnership, right? So for example, we work with Terminal's recruiting team and sort of marrying these processes. And Terminal noticed that one of our questions for our tech screen was actually a little bit culturally biased, right? And that was one of the things that we needed to ensure that we, that like, hey, like we are not asking a very like US centric or very culturally specific question. And so that enabled us to really kind of like change our interview questions overall, including in the US market, in case there are, you know, US based employees or candidates that weren't familiar with, say, you know, some of the US culture. And yeah, so the partnership has just been absolutely amazing. So very, very appreciative.
Thank you for the insights. Definitely appreciate the kind words, but also I think for the audience here, it's also helpful to the way you laid out the decision framework, right? What are the factors that you use to decide on which partner to go with? And I think that is something probably very useful as people consider their options, whether to use a partner. If so, how to decide on which partner will meet their requirements the best. And I believe, Robin, from some of our earlier conversations, was also, you know, hiring full-time talent was one of the bigger requirements as well. And that definitely helped narrow some of the choices there. So
Definitely.
Cool. Well, with that, I'm going to wrap this up and you know, just quickly summarize what we learned today, right? So obviously, what this means for leaders that are looking to hire remote is that the days where we could expect people to come to where the jobs, or come to the jobs, or come to the markets where the jobs were. Today, talent lives everywhere, and it's important to be flexible. Go where the talent is, meet in their market. In terms of what makes, or what are the engineers' preferences, they care about salary transparency. They care about equity, something that is, again, a great opportunity for startups, for pre-IPO companies to leverage when looking to attract talent. And lastly, it's important for companies to not just think about, okay, now that we have made the hire, let's make it remote friendly. Even your interviewing process, your recruiting process, how you approach these candidates has to be thought through from that remote lens and needs to be customized for markets and for remote recruiting in general. So with that, I will pass it on to Amalia for Q&A.
All right, thank you, Robin and Tejal. So we're going to go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just as a reminder to our attendees, please be sure to type your questions into the Q&A box in your control panel. Before we do jump fully into Q&A, I would like to take a moment to preview Terminal's next couple of webinars coming up in April. I'm actually going to go ahead and launch a poll for those of you that are interested in the early opportunity to sign up for either of these upcoming events. Our first webinar, Scaling Engineering Teams with Poland's Robust Talent Pool, takes place on April 21st. Why are some of tech's most established players choosing Poland to scale their teams? You'll learn the ins and outs of European hiring and get the insights to evaluate whether Poland is a good fit for your business with Terminal's Rahul Tawadi. In our second event on April 26th, you'll learn how to foster a strong remote-first culture, one that's inclusive and fair to win, engage, and retain the talent needed to scale your business. iCapital CTO Chris Piazza will share the remote leadership strategies that helped him scale senior engineering teams at a $6 billion+ fintech company. So I'm just going to leave this poll up a couple more seconds. All right, and we'll take a look at some of our questions here. All right, so we have a few to kick us off. This first one's for Robin. Robin, have you found that there are communication challenges in regards to working remotely, especially with regard to remote engagement?
Cool. Yeah, that's a super interesting question. And I can touch on a couple things, and hopefully I will hit on the remote engagement piece. So one of the first thing in terms of communication challenges that you all might be thinking of as you move into international is basically language proficiency, and just ensuring that you have really good English speakers. That's a kind of another benefit of working with Terminal, that they sort of ensure that they have that language proficiency so that they can work with your English speaking engineers. So that was one concern that we had in terms of communication challenges. In terms of remote engagement, it depends. You certainly are not going to get the same back and forth when having, say, a remote meeting versus doing something in person, right? And the way that we've kind of tackled that at Handshake is really trying to ensure that we are very, very conscious of how we run our meetings. A lot of times, if you have sort of a larger meeting, let's say like 8 to 15, it would really benefit to have sort of a facilitator, and to facilitate the meeting. Maybe you can use the raise hand function. It certainly has to be a little bit more structured than if y'all were sitting around, say, like a conference table. The other thing too is just really paying attention to meeting size. You are going to have that nice, clean, you're going to have that much cleaner conversational piece in a meeting. Say, if you have a meeting between 3 people and 5 people. But once it kind of makes it from 6 and up, you may want to go towards that facilitator piece. And so, these are some of the things that we think about in terms of like meeting size and how to be a little bit, as the meeting size goes up, how do we be a little bit more structured to ensure that everyone's thoughts feel heard and that you're getting the most out of the meeting?
Yeah, that's definitely a great point, and one that I resonate with as someone who's been working remote for the past few years completely. So speaking of working remote for the past few years, Robin, do you think that there are circumstances where remote teams should meet in person, or particular situations where teams should come together?
So personally, I do. And it's very interesting. If you jump on LinkedIn today, you will see a lot of points that this talk covers, right? Remote is the new cool, like everyone needs to embrace remote, right? What maybe you're not seeing on LinkedIn enough, and maybe this is a hot opinion, is that there are people who are kind of like me who actually really want a lot of who want that in-person interaction. And it's not because I'm a manager, right? It's just I'm a little bit more of an extrovert, and so I crave some of that in-person interaction. And so in order, again, like really at Handshake, we try to be as inclusive as possible and really thinking about different people's needs. And so while there are clear benefits to remote, there are also some benefits for someone like me who appreciates being in person. So a few things that we've done here at Handshake, this is why we kind of go in a hybrid environment. So we have a proper Denver office that allows me to kind of go in and get some of that social connection that I'm maybe missing as I had worked remote over the past couple of years through COVID. And also, we try to organize some sort of offsite where we meet and maybe mix together the fun and the and like business oriented meetings in order to connect in person to help build those bonds in that way. And so, yeah, to wrap that up, to make the point, I think it's kind of like different strokes for different folks. Like some people really, really love remote working. Some people like coming into the office, and in order to be as inclusive as possible, how do you build a culture that can accommodate for sort of both sets of people?
Yeah, it's all about providing that your employees that level of flexibility. So looking to the future, Robin, this is also for you. Do you have any plans to expand beyond the markets that you're currently hiring in? And, how is Handshake thinking about remote recruitment in 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, definitely. And this kind of goes back to our mission, right? Like talent is evenly distributed, opportunity is not, right? And so we really want to be a global company. We want to really embrace that and saying truly that talent is everywhere, right? Globally, but maybe the opportunities are more biased towards certain cities or certain locations. And so we definitely want to go global with our mission, and how that really impacts our talent strategy is what as I kind of mentioned, we kind of are stepping into Canada, Latin America as kind of that first step and see what challenges are we going to see working internationally, knowing that time zone, knowing that working outside our adjacent time zones is going to be incredibly challenging and will really change the way we operate. We've taken that first step. I think we've taken a lot of the lessons learned, and we've kind of understood like, well, we have to ensure that we accommodate for Colombian holidays, for example, or we need to ensure maybe an employee is very uncomfortable, despite their English proficiency being great, they're uncomfortable a lot of times like presenting because they're maybe self-conscious about their English, right? So we've learned some of these lessons by, moving outside the US market of like what we should be concerned about. I think the next step for us is really assessing, hey, how do we go global, go and move beyond our adjacent time zones, and which markets make sense. And so we're in the process of sort of brainstorming and thinking through that strategy right now.
Cool. Well, yeah, I personally am really excited to see what's next for you guys and what you're going to accomplish over the next couple of years in regards to that mission. All right, so we are coming up close on time here. So I think we're out of time for additional questions. So Robin and Tejal, before I go on to take our participants through our wrap-up segment, I just wanted to thank you both so much for making time for this discussion today. And for both contributing some really great insights. It was awesome having both of you on, and we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All right, so a couple of quick reminders for our attendees. So this webinar has been recorded and a link will be made available to participants shortly over email. I'd also like to remind you to please provide your feedback in our post-webinar survey, which should show up in your browser window as you leave the call. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.